This is Part 2, Episode 181. The Tower of Eternity back then had almost completely devoured and destroyed the demon god of death Samijina's domain. It gave him far too painful of a memory. After that time, it took him 3 whole years to recover, and 5 years to heal the very core of his body. This time, the Tower of Eternity had appeared once more. Although it had turned white now, Samijina's fear for it was even stronger than before. After suffering so much last time, he understood that he might be fine if he did not use his domain. However, when he truly faced the Tower of Eternity, he was still fearful. A beautiful figure stood at the top of the tower. Her black dress stood out even more above the shining white tower as the huge, black sickle in her hands shone with blue and purple light. She looked at Samijina from afar and gave off terrifying killing intent. Combined with the white haze from the huge tower, she actually managed to stun the entire fiend army. In possession of the Tower of Eternity, and also capable of wielding the powers of purification against the demons, she was obviously the vice-chairman of the Temple Union, vice-captain of the Bright Glimmer of Hope, chosen by the god of death, the saint-daughter of Samsara, Kia. No one noticed the ravishing joy in Xiao Yonghao's eyes when all the aerial fiends landed on the ground. He waved his right hand at the area below the balls and a golden light flashed in the air. If it were not for Kia's appearance, Samijina definitely would have noticed the golden light. However, all of his attention was now focused on Kia. Not only did the Tower of Eternity strike fear deep into his heart, the aura of that Kia gave off posed a great threat to him as well. 5th rank of the 9th step. Was this actually aura from the 5th rank of the 9th step? How was this possible? Since when did the humans possess a powerhouse at the 5th rank of the 9th step? In particular, a young lady like this who also wielded the Tower of Eternity that had given him painful memories. In the demon's understanding of the humans, only the starry sky holy knight Yang Haoyu from the distant Night Temple, who had not appeared on the battlefield for a very long time, seemed to be at the 5th rank of the 9th step. Of course, there was also Long Haochen, who had risen up recently, who might have been at that level. However, why was this girl at the same level? Samijina suddenly experienced an indescribable feeling. He originally believed the demon god emperor's arrangements were perfect. The humans would not be able to stop them by launching attacks from 2 sides. However, the humans had produced 9th step powerhouses he did not know of time and time again in this battlefield before the southeastern fort, as if nothing developed in the way they had decided it would develop in. Instead, many unaccounted variables had appeared. Will these variables lead to failure in the end? However, Samijina was still one of the 5 great demon gods after all. Even though he feared Kia very much, he recovered his composure very soon. His icy-cold voice boomed through the battlefield, "Fiends, attack." As he called out, Samijina began to shine with grey light once again. Afterwards, the grey light completely fused into his body, causing him to grow transparent. The heavy aura of death was completely withdrawn, while the demon god pillar that belonged to him in the distance shone with blinding grey light. If Samijina's current state was described in human terms, it would be a self-incarnating domain. Can't the Tower of Eternity absorb my domain? Then, I'll just avoid releasing my domain outside my body. I'd like to see how you absorb it. There was no room for doubt over Samijina's strength. When the demon god pillar lit up, he rapidly swelled in the air, becoming a huge fiend that was grey and translucent, standing 300 meters tall, in the blink of an eye. His transformation had made the morale of the entire fiend army surge. They immediately erupted with the speed they had been suppressing earlier. The army of 100,000 charged towards the southeastern fort. However, at this moment, just before the fiends above the 6th step had taken off into the air again, a strange aura suddenly permeated the battlefield, or more accurately, around 2,000 meters from the southeastern fort. By now, the fiend army had completely entered this range. Under the influence of the strange aura, all of the fiends suddenly slowed down despite speeding up just earlier. In the next moment, the ground suddenly lit up. The sudden occurrence immediately attracted Samajina's attention. A horrible omen immediately filled his heart. Oh no! Samajina's terrifying and tremendous figure quickly landed on the ground. At the same time, he made a gesture in the air with his hands and a huge, grey spear appeared in his grasp. The spear actually shone with 7-colored light. It was actually a weapon on par to divine tools. However, why was Kia here? It was to prevent Samijina from affecting Long Houchen's arrangements. As soon as Samijina landed on the ground, the tower that he feared the most charged towards him with surprising speed. As it flew over, the Tower of Eternity withdrew all of the purifying light from earlier. Above the tower where Kia stood before, a pure, white lotus appeared. From one side was the horrible omen from the ground, while the other side was a terrifying attack that threatened Samajina's life. Without a doubt, he would definitely value his own life over everything else as a demon god. Compared to his own life, were the safety of his clansmen of any significance? As a result, even when Samijina was reluctant to do so, he could only block Kia's attack first. He could not worry about the light that had suddenly appeared on the ground. The ground surged. The golden light surged. Huge, golden patterns spanning 100 meters across appeared silently on the ground one after another. Golden mist rose up and covered an altitude of 100 meters in the blink of an eye. The appearance of each golden pattern was similar. They were all 100 meters across and covered in complicated symbols with a magic hexagram in the center. The symbols all seemed to have been activated in that moment, floating upwards with the golden mist. There were around 30 patterns like this. They were all a certain distance from each other. However, when the 30 patterns lit up from the ground without any warning, it seemingly dyed the flat area before the southeastern fort golden. In the distance, the armies of each demon clan that had just retreated were stunned by this sight. What was this power? In the history of battles between the humans and demons, such a grand sight had never appeared before. The humans had never used a method of battle like this before either. However, what were these golden arrays? Just as they were shocked, the fiends began to howl out miserably. The golden mist was like a sticky liquid, trapping most of the fiends. Only the strongest fiends, who saw this the soonest, were able to charge out of the mist into the air. However, most of them, the fiends incapable of flight in particular, were enveloped by the mist teeming with an aura of light. Boom! A first rumble exploded in the center of the 30 golden arrays. As it boomed out, the central array suddenly shone with scorching golden light. In the moment the light, that was even brighter than the sun, erupted, the terrifying sound wave drowned out the wails of the fiends. The range of the explosion of golden light immediately expanded. It went from 100 meters to 300 meters across. From above, the ground seemed like a huge, golden circle of fire. The center of the fire had even become white hot. This was clearly magic on part to forbidden spells. Even if it had not reached the level of forbidden spells, it was close. Following the first explosion was a second. The 30 golden arrays basically erupted continuously within the next 10 seconds. In the air, Samajina's clash with the Tower of Eternity had just ended. Compared to the golden color of the ground, white and gray collided in the air. There were no particularly intense booms, but the entire sky distorted the moment the Tower of Eternity and Samajina collided. Samajina's face was distorted as well. This time, he did not sense the terrifying, soul-devouring power of the Tower of Eternity from last time, but the terrifying power that could purify all auras of death. What was even more terrifying was when the huge Tower of Eternity collided with his body, the strange lotus on the top lit up. Its pure white petals shot over and enveloped him. The intense feeling of danger made Samijina push his demon god transformation to the strongest level with regard for anything else. Like a grey gemstone, he shone as brightly as he could as his spear gave off seven-colored light. He unleashed a dense cluster of thrusts. However, from the collision, a third of Samijina's figure that stood 300 meters tall directly collapsed. The golden light subsided and he was only 200 meters tall now, and he had been knocked several thousand meters away, far away from the battlefield before the southeastern fort. The portion of grayness from Samijina's demon god transformation had been absorbed by the Tower of Eternity. Kia appeared on top of the Tower of Eternity again, and she gazed at Samijina from afar. Her aura only surged, locking onto the demon god of death. Long Houchen have obviously thoroughly considered everything when he sent Kia to the southeastern fort. In terms of pure strength, Kia could only match up to Marbas out of the 5 great demon gods at most, even after breaking through to the 5th rank of the 9th step, as well as using the 2 divine tools, the Sickle of the God of Death and the Tower of Eternity. And that was under the circumstance that she had used the Holy Guards. After all, the demon god pillars that belonged to the 5 great demon gods were existences close to supra-divine tools. Kia might have been powerful, but she was still weaker in terms of absolute strength. However, there was something called restriction in this world. An analysis of strength would lead to this result, but it would be a different story on the actual battlefield. If Kia had encountered the hell demon god Marbas, she might have been in for a tough battle, but when she appeared before the demon god of death Samijina, it would be a tragedy for Samijina. Before Kia, the death magic and abilities he relied heavily on, even his demon god pillars, was firmly restricted before Kia, just like how Kia basically restrained all of the undead kings alone back in Haoyue's realm. Before the power of purification, all auras of death would become nothing. Long Houchen had sent Kia to the southeastern fort in order to suppress the strongest demon god of death. There was no need for them to fear the other demon gods. Terrifying balls of golden light exploded from the ground. The light element even formed terrifying elemental storms. When all 30 arrays had erupted, even powerhouses on Kia and Samijina's level were afraid of remaining in their original position. They would quickly fly higher. Out of the fiend army of 100,000, the only ones left visible were the few that flew in the air like flies, while the remaining fiends had all died to the sea of golden light. Let alone the demons in the distance who were stunned, even the people from the 6 temples on the walls were dumbfounded as well. None of them could imagine such a terrifying sight would appear on the battlefield. Before the southeastern fort over a width of 5,000 meters, all of it had become a sea of golden light. The wildness of the golden light was enough to drive people insane. Even supra-forbidden spells could not be so destructive. Even if the demon god emperor was present, there would be nothing he could do when all the arrays had erupted. This was. Ha 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 ha. Standing on the battlement, the temple head of the warrior temple Chiao Yonghao basically laughed hysterically. He had lived more than a century, but he had never felt as happy as today. The fiend army of 100,000 had actually died before the southeastern fort just like this. Just how important of a victory was this? Across the entire southeastern fort, apart from the few magicians who lay down this deadly trap, only he knew this terrifying attack was awaiting the demons. This was also why he could remain composed the entire time. This deadly trap had been specially prepared for the fiends. Samijina had become completely dumbfounded. He hovered in the air as he looked at the surging sea of golden light below. His facial muscles had completely stiffened. How was this possible? How? He wanted to shout and question crazily, but he was unable to produce a single sound in that moment. As the 4th demon god, the head of the fiends, his fiend army of 100,000 that was the second strongest across the entire race, had actually been annihilated by the terrifying forbidden light spell just like this. Sensing the surging elemental storm of light, he did not have any hope at all. Even for him, he would not be able to retreat unscathed from the center of the elemental storm. It was a trap. It was a trap set up by the despicable humans. However, why would they have a trap like this? There were far too many questions in Samajina's head. In that moment, his head had even blanked out. He was unable to accept what had happened before him. Originally, he believed victory was within his grasp, but all of his hopes had immediately plummeted. He even witnessed the annihilation of his clansmen. The psychological impact on his was just too great. The Fiend clan had mobilized all of its fiends that could fight in this battle. The only ones left in the clan were the old and the young, the women and the children. It was possible to say that the army of 100,000 formed the entire force of the fiends. This was also the force that Samijina relied on the most. Ah! Samijina yelled at the sky. As he yelled, his grey body rapidly swelled. This time, he directly reached 500 meters tall. His eyes had become completely blood-red, while his expanded body even began to crack, which had dense auras of death oozing out of. Indeed, under such a heavy psychological impact, Samijina had almost lost his mind. Of course he could sense how Kia utterly restrained him in the clash earlier. At this time, he directly used the demonic collapse technique regardless of the consequences. He wanted vengeance. He wanted to kill all of the humans. He had gone mad. He had completely gone mad. Samajina's demon god pillar in the distance shone with unprecedented grey light, directly illuminating him. Grey armor immediately covered his body, while the demon god pillar in the distance vanished in the next instance. The spear in Samajina's hands suddenly expanded. Grey symbols seemed to appear. He had actually turned his demon god pillar into a terrifying weapon. Kia watched Samijina transform coldly. Her eyes were clear. She knew she had to stop Samijina no matter what, because there was not a single powerhouse in the southeastern fort that could stop him in his current state. Samijina had come for revenge even if it would cost him his life. 12 streaks of light, each a different color, shot out from the Tower of Eternity and formed a ring around Kia. It was the 12 holy guards that the holy necromancer, slumbering calamity Elux had left for her. Kia was confident that she could suppress Samijina. Her cultivation was not much weaker than her opponent's in the first place, and she had an advantage in terms of elements. The Tower of Eternity also dominated Samijina. However, it could not hold back Samijina when he had lost his mind and put his life on the line. His current state was similar to Arbao when Long Houchen faced off against him earlier. The 12 holy guards surrounded Kia. The 12 of them formed 2 rings, with the warriors inside and mags outside. Both rings possessed all 6 elements. As 6-colored light flickered, the 12 holy guards formed 2 hexagrams of different sizes, surrounding and protecting Kia in the center. Dense, 6-colored light rose up as the tremendous power of element gathered around Kia. When the 6-colored light entered the boundary of the hexagon in the center of the inner hexagram, it was actually converted into pure force of chaos. This array was created by the slumbering calamity Elux. In the past, he had used his own strength and the full support of the 12 holy guards to fight against almost all of the human powerhouses from across the lands. Even though the 12 holy guards were weaker than when they accompanied Elux in the past and had not reached the level of domains, they were still 12 powerhouses of the 9th step. Under their combined array, Kia's aura immediately swelled by several folds. The increase could even rival Samijina when he underwent the demon god transformation. Standing at the top of the Tower of Eternity, Kia lifted her sickle of the god of death high over her head. The black sickle gradually became a translucent white, as the dense power of purification immediately expanded as a huge ring of light. This was Kia releasing her domain of purification as far as possible. As she released the domain of purification, Kia did not go up to receive the crazed Samijina. Instead, she made the Tower of Eternity descend. The domain of purification also descended towards the element storm that was gradually weakening. If Samijina was still rational, he would definitely be able to guess what Kia was doing. However, he had already come close to losing his mind now. He thrusted his spear and he lunged forward through the air, immediately arriving above Kia. He swept his spear downwards, directly toward Kia. Currently, Samijina was just too powerful. After unleashing this strike, a huge gap ripped open in the sky as dimensional storms ravaged the air, even sucking up the elemental storm below. However, this unintentionally assisted Kia. Basically, the entire fiend army had been annihilated under the consecutive explosions of the terrifying light arrays. It had claimed several tens of thousand lives. The lives of demons were still lives. After they died, they would also produce an aura of death. Light was unable to purify death completely, but Kia's domain of purification, could, in the process of purifying death, was equivalent to increasing her personal strength. The strands of white power of purification surged up from the elemental storm below, filtered by the domain of purification, before pouring into the Tower of Eternity. Only after being purified a second time, by the Tower of Eternity, was it channeled into Kia. Coupled with the boost from the Holy Guard's array, Kia's aura reached an unprecedented level. Raising the sickle of the god of death upwards, the light in Kia's eyes flickered. In the next moment, a bitter white light appeared in the sky and collided with the falling spear. Even though their proportions were completely off, Samijina and Kia actually shuddered at the same time when they collided. Samijina's spear was knocked away, while Kia grunted and blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. However, she still managed to get through Samijina's attack. Samijina unleashed a bellow. Now, his domain of death, as well as the power from the demon god transformation and demonic collapse technique, had fused into his body completely. Under the collision with Kia's 7 arts of the god of death earlier, another large portion of his death magic was purified. If this battle where one side only grew weaker, while the other grew stronger continued, it was impossible for Samijina to gain any advantage. However, Samijina had completely lost his mind now. He did not care about his own safety anymore. With a twist of his spear, all of the grayness on his body gathered on the spear, and all of the symbols on the spear lit up. The terrifying aura completely erupted. The spear actually turned back into a demon god pillar that spanned several hundred meters in length, directly thrusting towards Kia. This video will end here.